Christmas Eve has a way of making silence feel heavier. That winter, silence followed me everywhere. I'd taken a seasonal night delivery job in northern Maine. The kind of place where the sky feels lower, the trees crowd, broads, and the cold doesn't just chill you, it watches you. Snow muffles sound out there. It turns the world into something hollow and distant, like you're driving through a dream that doesn't want you in it. The job was simple. Drive, drop, leave. No interactions required. They gave us a list of roads to be careful on, not because of accidents, not because of ice, but because, according to my supervisor, people don't come back the same. Everyone laughed, everyone except him. One road on that list was circled in red marker, Frost Hollow Road. When I asked about it, he didn't answer right away. He just looked at me for a long second, then said, "If you end up there after dark, don't turn your engine off. And whatever you hear, don't follow it." That was it. No explanation. Christmas Eve was busy. Too busy to think. Packages stacked. Pie addresses blurring together as snow fell harder with every mile. The radio crackled constantly with static. Christmas songs fading in and out like they were drowning. Around 10:47 p.m. My GPS rerouted. One final delivery appeared on the screen. Destination, Frost Hollow Road. My stomach tightened. I considered skipping it, marking it undeliverable. But I needed the money, and curiosity has a way of overruling good sense when you're tired and alone. The turnoff came suddenly. No streetlights, no sign. Just a narrow cut through the trees where the forest seemed to swallow the road whole. Snow piled high on either side, and the tire tracks ahead of me looked old, half-buried, like no one had used the road in days. The radio died the moment my truck crossed the tree line. Not static, not fading, dead. The air felt different too. Thick, pressurized, like the forest was holding its breath. I drove slowly, headlights scraping across trunks and low branches. The snow fell straight down, unnaturally still. No wind, no animal sounds, no distant hum of civilization. Then I heard it, singing. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a phantom echo of the radio. But then the words formed. Silent night, holy night. A child's voice. Thin, clear. Wrong. I eased off the gas. The singing wasn't coming from the road ahead. It was drifting in from the woods, weaving between the trees like smoke. It sounded close, but also far away, as if distance didn't apply to it properly. I laughed nervously and told myself it was someone's outdoor speaker, a decoration, prank. But the singing didn't loop. It continued, perfectly timed, perfectly paced. I rounded a bend and nearly slammed on the brakes. A farmhouse stood just off the road, half hidden by snowbanks and leaning trees. Its windows were dark except for a single weak yellow glow on the ground floor. The structure looked old, too old to still be standing. Its roof sagged, and the porch drooped like it was tired of holding itself up. A wreath hung on the front door. Not green. Brown. Dead pine needles clung to it like needles on a corpse. Ribbon had once been red, but now it looked stained, darkened, almost absorbed. My GPS chimed softly. "You have arrived." The singing stopped. The sudden silence was worse. I pulled into the driveway, but didn't shut the engine off. The truck idled loudly, the sound jarringly out of place in the dead stillness. My breath fogged the windshield as I stared at the house. The delivery label read, "H. Calder, no contact required." Grabbed the package with shaking hands and stepped out into the snow. The cold hit instantly, biting through my jacket like teeth. My boots crunched loudly, the sound echoing far too much in the quiet. With every step toward the porch, I felt the overwhelming sensation that something was leaning in close behind me, so close. I could almost feel its breath on my neck. I reached the porch. The wood groaned under my weight. Before I could knock, the front door creaked open by itself, just enough to reveal darkness inside. Warm air drifted out, carrying the smell of old pine melted wax, and something underneath it, something stale, something that had been sealed away too long. I should have dropped the package and run. Instead, I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a soft, final click. The living room was lit entirely by candles, dozens of them. They lined shelves, tables, the floor, even the stairs. Their flames didn't flicker. They burned perfectly still, casting shadows that didn't quite match the objects they belonged to. A Christmas tree stood in the center of the room. It was tall, skeletal, its branches thin and twisted. Ornaments hung from it in uneven clusters. At first, I thought they were handmade decorations, rustic, old-fashioned. Then I saw what they were. Teeth, human teeth, children's teeth. They dangled from strings, clinking softly against one another as if moved by a breeze I couldn't feel. Mixed among them were buttons, rings, name tags, tiny shoestring bows, and scraps of fabric that looked suspiciously like pieces of old coats. My stomach lurched. All is calm. All is bright. The singing came from upstairs now. Footsteps followed it. Slow, careful, deliberate. Each step creaked like the house was counting them. A figure appeared at the top of the staircase. Tall, unnaturally thin. He wore a red coat that hung from his frame like a forgotten costume. Its fabric faded and frayed. His beard was long and white, but uneven, like it had grown in patches over many years. His eyes caught the candlelight, reflected it far too brightly. He smiled. "Delivery," he said warmly. "You're right on time." My legs refused to move. "I'll just leave it," I said, my voice barely working. "Sorry to bother you." "Oh, you didn't," he replied, descending one step at a time. "I wait all year for tonight." That's when I noticed the walls. They weren't solid dot faces, pressed faintly beneath the wallpaper, like people trapped just below the surface. Small faces, children's faces. Their mouths moved silently, shaping words I couldn't hear. The man tilted his head, listening. "They're excited," he said softly. The front door slammed shut. The candles flared brighter. Something small and cold wrapped around my ankle. I screamed, Hands burst from the floorboards, pale, skeletal fingers gripping my legs, my boots, my clothes. Dozens of them, children's hands. Their touch burned like frostbite. Christ the Savior is born. The choir joined in. Everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the tree. That the old man knelt beside me, his smile stretching too wide. Every Christmas, he whispered, someone forgets the road. Someone wanders too far. Someone who no one will miss. He leaned closer, and someone new joins the carol. The hands tightened. The floor began to give way. And that's when I kicked hard. Something snapped. The grip loosened. Just enough. I clawed forward, nails scraping wood, candles tipping and spilling hot wax across the floor. Flames licked at my sleeves as I dragged myself toward the door. The house screamed, not a scepter feeling. I burst through the door and fell face first into the snow. Behind me, the singing turned into wailing. I didn't look back. I ran. I don't remember my feet touching the ground as I ran. I only remember the sound of the house behind me. Not footsteps, not shouting. Singing sleep in heavenly peace. The words stretched and warped, pulled thin, like tape slowing down. The voices overlapped, some too deep to belong to children, others so high they felt like needles in my ears. The sound followed me off the porch, down the driveway, pen into the tresiette. No matter how far I ran, it never seemed to get quieter. I dove into my truck and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. My hands shook so badly, I missed the ignition twice. The engine finally turned over. Behind me, the farmhouse lights flared bright, every window glowing at once like a pair of watching eyes multiplied a dozen times over. Shadows moved behind the glass. Too many, pressing forward, pushing I through the truck into gear. And floored it. The tires spun uselessly for a moment before catching. Snow sprayed behind me as I tore down the driveway. Branches scraping the sides of the truck like grasping fingers. I didn't breathe until the house vanished behind the bend. Even then, I didn't slow down. Frost Hollow Road stretched ahead of me, longer than it had any right to be. The trees leaned inward, their branches arching overhead until my headlights barely reached past the hood. The snow grew thicker, heavier, and the sense of being chased settled deep into my bones. Then I saw headlights in my rear view. Mirror. My heart slammed into my throat. They were faint at first, flickering in and out as the road curved. But they were there, following me. No, I whispered. No. The lights didn't belong to a car. They were too high, too close together, and they moved, wrong gliding instead of bouncing with the road. They gained ground. The singing returned. Not outside this time. Inside the truck. Silent night. I slammed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't coming through the air. It felt like it was vibrating inside my skull, rattling my thoughts loose. The dashboard lights flickered. For a split second, my headlights went out in that darkness. Something passed directly in front of the truck. I hit the brakes hard. The truck skidded sideways. nearly sliding off the road before I corrected. When the headlights snapped back on, the road was empty, but the rear-view mirror wasn't. A child stood in the bed of my truck. I screamed. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. Her face was pale blue with cold, lips cracked and bleeding. Her eyes were wrong cloudy, like they'd frozen from the inside out. She wore an old-fashioned coat, too thin for the weather, and her feet were bare. She smiled at me, her mouth opened, holy infant, pace so tender and mild. I swerved violently. She didn't fall. Instead, she leaned forward, her frozen fingers tapping softly against the rear window. Tap, tap, tap. More shapes rose up behind her. Another child, then another. They climbed into the truck bed like spiders, their movements jerky and unnatural. Some were missing fingers. Others had twisted limbs that bent the wrong way. One boy dragged himself forward, using only his arms, his legs trailing behind him like dead weight. Their mouths moved in perfect unison, sleep in heavenly peace. The truck's engine began to choke. I watched the RPM needle drop. No, I begged. Please, please. The girl at the window tilted her head. Her smile widened. Then the engine roared. Back to life all at once. The force threw the children backward like leaves in a storm. They tumbled off the truck, vanishing into the snow without a sound. The road ahead finally opened up. Streetlights appeared in the distance. Civilization. I didn't slow down until I reached the main highway, where the trees thinned and the night felt normal again. The singing faded into memory, leaving behind only the pounding of my heart and the smell of hot metal and fear. I pulled over and threw up in the snow. When I finally made it home, I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with every light on, staring at the wall as dawn slowly crept in through the window. My phone buzzed, constantly missed calls from dispatch asking why my tracker had gone dark for nearly 40 minutes. I didn't answer. The next day, I went back to the delivery center and quit. No explanation. They didn't ask for one. The supervisor just nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for this conversation. "Did you hear the singing?" he asked. I froze. He sighed. "Yeah, that's usually how it starts." A week later, I looked up Frost Hollow Road. It doesn't officially exist. No current maps list it. No property records show a farmhouse. But buried deep in county archives, I found a single article dated December 24th, 1927. Farmhouse fire claims. 17 children, local caretaker presumed DAD. Caretaker's name was Harold Calder. Witnesses claimed that before the fire, neighbors could hear children singing from the house at all hours of the night. Afterward, the road was abandoned, rerouted, forgotten. Almost every Christmas Eve, I still wake up around midnight, and for just a moment right before sleep takes mine, hear it, soft, patient, silent night. Like something out there is still waiting for the next delivery, and hoping someone else forgets the road.